waka te arawa tangata, ka hore pēr he kōrero I tū atu I tēnei hei whakamārama I te tike-tanga o tō tāua kai kōrero I whai mai nei. We have Lani Kereopa here with us on our podcast. That's to celebrate te arawa success. What does that look like? How does that feel? But also, what are the learnings that we can gain from this so that everybody from all walks of life can take on these learnings. Nā reira, Eko, can you introduce yourself again? Tell us who you are, your whakapapa, and how you fit into the te arawa waka and scope of things here.
Morena, hene. Ko Lani Kereopa tōku ingoa, ki te tau tō Māua Kereopa, no tō taua Kereopa, Kereopa, Ihaia Kereopa, no Ngāti Tarawhai, no ngā Tūhaurangi, Ngāti Wāhiau, me te mautere Matakama, tō taua whānau, ki te taho tō taua kuia moana rika, no te whānau rika, no Ngāti Whakaue, no Ngāti Pukaki, me Ngāti Whāua. When it comes to whakapapa, I guess for me, when my dad died 25 years ago, I knew nothing outside of my immediate family, my uncles and aunties, cousins and my grandparents. And at that time I said to myself, I don't want my children to be in the same position ever. And so with the help of amazing nieces and nephews, such as yourself, I've learnt heaps over the last 25 years since I became a mama and an auntie. And, you know, for me, whakapapa is different from genealogy in that it's not just about the past, it's about the present and about future generations. And so, you know, our Karaua Kereopa Hori was, as we know, honorary trustee on Te Arawa Lakes Trust, but we're still learning and still researching about him, about his story, about his life, and you know, so there's a lot that I do know about our whakapapa these days that I try and incorporate into the everyday life of my children and nephews and nieces. I know that we come from carvers and weavers and storytellers and warriors and survivors and leaders, but you know, there's still a whole lot that we're trying to learn.
There's power in understanding one's whakapapa, and for those who are listening and those who are watching this podcast, Lani and I share the same whakapapa. My mother and Lani are first cousins, and my great-grandparents, who Lani just spoke about, Moana Rika, who married Ihaia Kereopa, and that is where the basis of my te arawa whakapapa on my mother's side comes from. And with their union comes our papakainga and all of the learnings that come within that. So for those who are listening to our podcast is about how do we connect, how do we maintain our connection, how do we encourage identity, and what does that look like for one, an individual, but also as your place in the world, your place in your whānau, your place in your iwi, in your hapu, but ultimately where do you sit in the world and how does that reconnect you with everything that's around us? So very, very privileged. This is actually my first time I've been able to interview my auntie on the incredible mahi that she does, because as a whānau member, I sit with my auntie and I talk to my auntie as if she was like my mum. She's a mother figure to me, and for those who are listening, I hope, I do know that you'll learn so much with the incredible mahi that you've done in your whole entire life, and then even right up until this mark. So where do we start? Where do you want to start when it comes to, at the moment I know you're right in the middle of the climate change, what would you call it, the space that we're in right now. You started this journey a few years ago. How does that work?
I think the start of things for me was being raised in a family where, even though my dad and his brothers and sisters didn't know a lot about their whakapapa, they were raised within Ohinumutu. So they were raised in pā life, and so they had a pride about their whānau, about their extended hapu, about the whenua that we were raised in, and we've been building on that as a whānau. And so I guess my journey in the taiao started, and the taiao space started when I could see I could see the difference from what I understood of my grandparents and my parents' generation. I could see the changes between their stories and the changes between what I had grown up with, seeing and experiencing, and then the significant changes that have occurred in the 25 years since I became a mother, and what my children, what is now the new norm for my children. And I could see the deterioration of things like water security, of food security, of our energy security, our geothermal. I grew up with stories of my father and them bathing communally within the village. I grew up where bathing, where connecting with your whānau and hapu in our communal baths was still the norm. And then now, 25 years later, my children, majority of the families within Ohinumutu village no longer have access to geothermal baths. It's just one example of the deterioration of our cultural of our cultural assets, of our lifestyle, that has changed through no fault of our own, directly because of the decisions and the impacts of external policymakers, of the decisions of councils and of government. And I guess that's where I started to, feel angry and just think, who's trying to maintain and restore what we hold precious as a whānau and hapu. There seems to be a lot of leadership within the iwi, but it was all really focused on corporate success, trying to do well in the Pākehā world. And so that's for me where it kind of started. And reality is, I might come from a very political family, a very outspoken family, but it doesn't actually come natural to me. I would prefer to just stay quietly at home. I'd never leave Ohinumutu if I had the chance. I'd just happily stay there and venture out occasionally to do some shopping. But I couldn't see a lot of action or leadership in the taiao space, and I felt like I had to speak up. It wasn't really a choice. If I didn't start speaking up, exactly.
For those who are listening, just want to explain the way of life here in Te Arawa, and one of those things is to we have waiariki and ngāpa, where everyone naturally bathes together, and they've been doing it for generations and generations. I think even the word whawhi comes from the sound that you hear when you're in the bath, and you can hear, and if you're walking towards one of the baths, you can distantly hear people having a whawhi, and that's actually where the word comes from with regards to having a little bit of a kōrero and a chat. It's the muffling of the sound that you kind of hear when you can hear whānau having that time in the bath. And outsiders looking in, when you go for a ngāwha or you go for a bath, whether hirere, you'd either be at the hirere or in your own whānau bath, those are memories that most people will treasure and cherish for the rest of their lives. It's the way that they can connect to their waituku kiri or their ancestral waters. And so when you're talking about the impact that these decisions have made, that have been made on places like Ohinemutu, even like from my own personal experience, remember the baths running at the homestead, and now to not having the baths, and when the baths are not there, then it doesn't become the norm, and then how do you reconnect back to those wai and have those sorts of ways of living? So my next question for you is around, I know you've been in this space, but you're also in these leadership roles to help try and influence those spaces to make better decisions for your uri, for the home that you love the most. Ohinemutu is like your heart. And I want to kind of ask you, there's that drive to kind of get up and work and fight for the whenua and protect those cultural assets that you talk about. How is that going, and where are you at with that, with your kāinga, but also, can you tell me a little bit about that?
How is it going? Sometimes I think, why am I always on the losing team? I feel like I'm always saying ka whawhai tonu mātou, and I think we see wins. Matatini, has exploded across the world. People are loving our culture, and you can see the pride amongst our whānau. So there are wins. In the taiao space, not so much. And so, yes, I'm really lucky that I've had opportunities to step up into some, I guess, leadership roles or some representative roles at least. One thing I do want to say is when I joined Te Arawa Lakes Trust, I was involved in hapu politics within Ohinemutu. I had a voice there, but one of my first ever meetings that I went to was alongside our environmental manager, Nikki Douglas, and it was a hui where I had been asked to represent Ngāti Whakaue amongst other iwi and hapu representatives in discussions with council to discuss Plan Change 10, which was around land use in this catchment. And I went into that meeting thinking I want to represent Ngāti Whakaue as best I can, and I sat there for a couple of hours and I couldn't understand what the hell anyone was talking about. And I felt inadequate and thought, I don't belong in this space. People were trying to be very kind. They could see that I was sitting there saying nothing and were saying, do you have anything to contribute, Lani? And I honestly had nothing because I couldn't understand what was going on. That was 5 years ago. Now, I go into those types of meetings and I have the most to say in those meetings. So, what I want to say is, you don't know what you don't know, and everybody's got to start somewhere. The more you start doing anything, it's like practicing anything. The more you start to understand, then you start to see the bigger picture and the context of things. And then next minute you're being asked to lead things, which doesn't come natural to me. It doesn't come natural to a lot of people. But whether you're a born leader, whether you're good at speaking or not, I prefer to write. That's where I feel safe and confident. I don't feel, I don't enjoy having to speak off the cuff, and like in these situations at all. But I think if you are passionate about anything, find a way to have a voice in that space. And that's all I've done really. And I'm really lucky particularly at Te Arawa Lakes Trust, that I have to acknowledge Karen's leadership. I've seen that she has not only brought together great people and a great team, but she has trusted those people and trusted those teams to make decisions and to do their job. And the accolades and the awards that have come out of those teams show that that type of leadership works when our whānau are given the support and the belief that they can do well. They do. They thrive. And I've been extremely lucky to work with people such as Nikki Douglas and William Anaru, and just learned so much. But also working at Te Arawa Lakes Trust, this has been my 5th year now, has helped me to connect with other people within the iwi, who I rate, like Kerry and Hancock, Raimona Emia, Kipper Morgan, people like that, who I've just learned off. They've given me confidence. We support each other in whatever way we can in our own spaces, across hapu, across the iwi, and that's what helps me to carry on.
Valuing hapu kōrero, valuing the ground, people on the ground, and the mātauranga that's generated from our papakainga, our whenua, and those who live and breathe, can sometimes be quite difficult in terms of bridging the gap between that and the policymaker. And you've been in the spectrum of things from that end, and now you're up in this part. And I know that you've said that you kind of feel like you're not in a winning team, but you understand that by not being at the table sometimes is far worse than being at the table. So can you talk to me about, obviously congratulations on being the first Māori ward here in Rotorua. I know this is a first for everyone, but it's also a first for you, understanding that whole system, that the politics, the way things are run from that end. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how are you feeling in your first year of your term?
Well, we're only, I think, 4 months in since we were elected, and so right now it's just a learning curve, learning how council, local government works, building relationships with the other councillors. I think regardless of the hat that I wear, whether it's as a councillor, whether it's as a climate change coordinator, for me the goal is always the same, and that is rangatiratanga, mana motuhake. And I guess, and what I mean by that is, I grew up as I said, in a political family where I was lucky enough to be surrounded by thought leaders such as Auntie Tuhipo Kereopa, Annette Sykes, Eva Rickard, Tamiti, Mike Smith, Donna Awatere Huata, people like that, and particularly Tuhipo, Auntie Tuhipo taught me that rangatiratanga is about self-determination at home. And so whether or not I'm working in council, whether or not I'm working for the Māori Climate Platform Interim Advisory Committee, or as Climate Change Coordinator at Te Arawa Lakes Trust, for me, whether people believe in climate change or not, whether people believe in weather modification, whatever the belief, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter what hat I wear. The end goal remains the same. It always remains the same, and that is rangatiratanga, self-determination within our homes, within our communities, within our hapu. So, that means food and water security, and sovereignty. That means energy security and sovereignty. That means our whānau being safe and healthy in making our own decisions, and protecting our own environments and resources for the well-being of our future generations. So, yeah, like I said, it doesn't matter really what space I'm in or what hat I might be wearing or what opportunities I get or don't get. The end goal will always remain the same.
This might be a little bit off, but you're kind of explaining the difference between pre-colonization and then colonial and then returning and thing. And I want to acknowledge Tuhipo Kereopa, who was a huge change maker within just our little whānau, but who also helped change the mindsets of those even around her with her involvement in those land movements, the marches. I think they call them the Renaissance era. So we're now in like 50 years on since that sort of mahi. And for a whānau like yours, Lani, who highly, I don't even know how to say it. I wanted to say katorika. I was going to say Catholicism, but I didn't know how to pronounce it out properly. My generation is the next generation, or being raised in kura kaupapa, kohanga reo, and fully not knowing any other way. And then obviously my mother's era, which is your era, have been raised heavily katorika, but also still raised in the pā, and the mindset has changed from there. And then into this generation, there's a whole new makeup of rangatahi with the same goal that Tuhipo had set for our whānau, which is to maintain mana motuhake, rangatiratanga, self-determination. But also we're in the stage of how do we be self-sustainable, to be able to live off your own whenua, live off your own resource without having to go to the supermarket to go and buy some food that came from all the way over in China and then returning here. And then that's the whakapapa of the kai that we're eating. How does that affect our tinana? And I'm thinking of Kepa Morgan as well with his regard to water quality. Scientists try and convince you to say, to think, we're going to pump the sewage into here, but it's all watered down, it's treated. And so voices like Kepa Morgan, where he resonate because he says it doesn't matter. The whakapapa or the DNA and the chromosomes within that will affect our roto moana, they'll affect the coda, they'll affect the way that we drink water, and ultimately will tamper with what we're made up with. So the next question for you is can you explain how the system here works with regards to our roto, our taiao, and what parts are you passionate about, or like have you found a gap, or is it just an entire system that you kind of work with when it comes to I know that I'm going a little bit off track, but now what's come to my mind is Te Urina o Kia, coordinating an advisory group to begin with, I think it was, and then coming into a strategy that would help and aid Te Arawa into coming up with their own plan with regards to the tile. I was a bit well-winded, but because you've done so many things, it's quite hard to pinpoint something. I guess I want to ask you, how does that whole view work from your perspective?
It's got to start at home, first and foremost. Our whānau need to stop accepting the impacts of the outside world on our communities. Right now, councils are making decisions around housing intensification, and there is no voice that I can hear within the iwi talking about our papakainga, our hapu communities that have been here, for 1,000 years. And I'm talking about Te Kurutu, Whakarewarewa Sala Street, Tarua Road, those sorts of areas. There's no voice that I can hear saying, okay, if we're going to intensify housing in those areas, how do we ensure that it's our whānau that are housed appropriately within housing that is suitable for us, but also in a way that protects our natural environment, protects our lakes, our waterways. There's the leadership within the iwi is really focused, as I say, at an entity level. That's really focused on mainstream economic systems, and we need to really bring it back. I'm a hapuist, as our Auntie Annette says. Really bring it back to how do we rebuild circular, sustainable economies at marae and hapu level, at community level, and that's where the change needs to happen. That's what we need to grow, from a flax roots level. That's where, of course it's important that, we've got whānau who are trying to work at a national political level, and, some at a regional and district level, but the real resourcing and support needs to go in at a hapu level to try and re-establish our own systems and processes that protect what's important to us.
Yeah. Ultimately, we're talking about the survival of Te Arawa, the survival of Māori, and survival of our ancestral systems, indigenous systems, and how they fit into the ever-changing world, maintaining our identity, connectivity, our whakakainga, and our environment. And that's the setting and the place that we're at the moment. So, Mokuake, the next question for you is around what are some of those sustainable solutions, or what is the vision? How far forward are we? How do we change the mindset so that everybody wins with regards to te taiao?
Well, this is my whakaaro, and I don't know how many people will share it, but as much as we can advocate and fight at a national level, or at a political level, whether it's national, central, or local government or regional government, those fights are important and they continue. But we can, whānau can only really control what we can control. We can't control what councils do. We can't control what government does, but we can try and regain control over our collectively owned resources. And so what that means is, we've got land trusts that are all in farming, but there's, most of the animal meat that's grown is exported overseas. Our whānau are suffering with food insecurity, with health issues from bad nutrition. We need to demand as whānau and hapu that our land trusts start looking at initiatives around improving the food security for our whānau and hapu in the iwi. So what of our lands can we use to grow fresh fruit and vegetables for our whānau? What support can our entities, our iwi entities, which hold the majority of our collectively owned monies and resources, but also have political clout, how do they support the restoration of our energy securities and sovereignty? So how, currently under the management of regional council, 70% of our geothermal in Rotorua is now being used to subsidise the heating costs of the tourism accommodation sector in Rotorua, and our whānau and hapu are living in cold, unhealthy homes. Where's the voice from our entities supporting the restoration of geothermal home heating and our geothermal bathing and our geothermal cooking for our whānau and hapu, to subsidise all, our energy costs as whānau? Our whānau can't afford to be paying multinational energy companies, for electricity and heating. And why the hell should we? We live on top of our own geothermal taonga, gifted to us from our atua and our tupuna. And that's been taken away from us. But, despite the fact that we're still here and we're still collectively the largest landowner within our Rotorua Rohe, we have no voice in those spaces. We have no leadership in those spaces. We have no resourcing in those spaces for leadership. Our collectively owned resources and monies and advocacy is being focused on doing well in Pākehā systems. It's all focused on colonial economic systems, and that has to change.
Yeah. One, if not the biggest challenge, is to inspire our own to value their own system. Mātauranga Māori, whakapapa, kōrero tuku iho, learning te reo, and also having confidence and faith in those systems is huge. It's a barrier. It actually takes courage and leadership to push against the norm and push it past racial slurs. You could be walking around te iwi Māori with walking around normally, and your biggest critics are normally hapu, whānau, and those closest to you. And so my last question to you will be around where do you get the courage and the bravery to speak up? And for those who are listening, what would you say to them?
I have to say that in my experience, my biggest support has come from my whānau and my hapu and our village of Ohinamatu. It's where I feel most safe. It's where I feel most supported. I think the courage, where does the courage come from? I think I absolutely 100% believe what my father told me and what my whānau showed me, and that is that we come from the most beautiful and one of the most beautiful and powerful cultures, peoples and places on this earth. I guess the principles that I live by, that we were taught in our whānau was karakia, and it doesn't matter what your religious beliefs might be. I mean, I talk to my father, my dad, who passed 25 years ago, and some of our tupuna, regularly asking for guidance. I talk to the taiao, when I'm feeling really pōti. That's where I go to try and rejuvenate, whether that's sticking my hands in the earth or whether that's going to the lake and having a cry, and I karakia to our atua. So karakia is really important for me. Trying to live, doing what is tika and pono. And also I think what's really important is trying to show aroha and kindness to children, to animals, to people, to all of God's creatures, whoever your God is, that we share this space with, who, you observe to need awhi or support, or who have less than you do. I believe living your life in that way is well, I feel that that's why our whānau is strong, is safe, and is blessed. So, am I any braver than anyone else? I don't particularly think so. I think I have a riri inside me sometimes when I see the destruction and of all that's beautiful around us. When I see injustice and inequality, that helps me to speak up. But really, I guess the main driver is is wanting to live up to the mana of our tupuna, is wanting the best for our next generations, and just doing your bit, really. Doing what you can do, however big or small that is.
Hei, he mahino I tēnei ki a koe. Maui whai wā ki te kōrero me te whakawhānui ngā whakaaro. Thank you for your learnings and your kōrero. We'll treasure them for generations to come. Tēnā rawa te koe.
Thanks.